And we are live. Good afternoon, Master Churchill, and I should say a Merry Christmas to you.
To me,
From a Jew to a wasp. Merry Christmas to you.
And happy holidays for you from Brooklyn.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Any attentive viewers, as soon as we get some, but
okay, well, let's stall for time until we get viewers because
sure, either way, we're recording and this is going to go up on YouTube. So this is what people will see. And the majority of the people eventually will see it on YouTube. So that's great. We have a slightly different format today. We're going to run through news and occurrences and things that are happening. And now people are starting to tune into the show.
How many?
Melania, the FLOTUS Melania, she's put up the Christmas decorations and they're out, baby.
Do you see a Hanukkah anywhere there?
Take a look at that, bud. Could you imagine anything more Christmassy than that?
This is what their bathroom looks like. Right?
I can imagine it would smell nice and tiny, though.
Yes.
Those look like all natural trees, Jack. It looks like maybe they deforested some part of Virginia to get this.
It wasn't Virginia, Seth. It was the Rose Garden.
They've had these Christmas trees on ice.
Exactly. Where did the trees go?
Where did the trees go?
They moved inside.
So they're now Melania has the Christmas decorations up, and they are, if you're interested, available on @FLOTUS on Twitter right now. And Melania has a good deal of, they've really gone all out. They've gone all out, and I think that there was a great deal of consulting that was done with visual consultants and interior designers about how not to repeat the ghastly Euro
trash.
Yeah, but I got in trouble for saying whiskey tango the other day on Facebook.
Yes, but Euro is a different animal because you're insulting so many countries.
Doesn't it represent an ethnicity?
Yeah, it's insulting everyone, sort of like we do. So, Seth, the question that you brought up before, which is very important, is when the Trumps leave the White House, number one, what are people going to find? And number two, what is going to be missing?
The silver.
Okay.
Is there an office of silver counters? Do they count the silver at the White House? Like, is that the thing that they do? I
think maybe they did it this time.
And I'm wondering what the silver pattern at the White House is.
There's also a French fry griller down in the cafeteria that they're keeping an eye on. As a matter of fact, they put one of those chips in it to find it.
Don't you think they have one of those at Mar-a-Lago / Rikers Island already?
Rikers Island. So those are the things that are missing. Now, as you said, Seth, so brilliantly, what are the things that they will find, and then what are the things that they will find that they will share with the public?
Right. What is it what's going to happen when Biden shows up at the White House January 20th, 12:30? They get done with the inauguration. Chief Justice Roberts gets into his stretch, Tahoe or Suburban and leaves. And then Joe and the First Lady are walking into the residence. What's missing? What's gone? What's been stolen? Are there holes in the wall?
Interesting. Maybe a peephole into the Oval Office bathroom.
Did you see on MSNBC this morning on Morning Joe? They had yet another book writing author that's not Joe and hawking his Truman book. So on Morning Joe this morning, they had this guy come on, and he's talking about all of the different things that the Bidens are likely to encounter. Did you watch Morning Joe this morning? It's kind of maybe it's a pointless endeavor.
Well, me watching it is a pointless endeavor.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, there's been fumigation.
I'm telling you, man.
Sure.
So what's in the news this morning that you want to talk about, my friend?
Oh boy, this is hard. There's so much really that's going on that is so funny. And I think that the idea of Trump staging a counter rally during the inauguration to announce his 2024 run, and it takes me back to Ken Casey and the Acid Trip guys, where they traveled around the United States with a Volkswagen bus that had a sign on the side. Barry Goldwater was running, and it said, "A vote for Barry is a vote for fun." And I think that Trump 2024, a vote for Donald, is a vote for fun. It is for us.
I'm. Isn't there a way that we can still prevail in the courts and make sure this guy stays in office? Because the material, I just can't do without it. Adam wants to know, what are your governing priorities for 2021? And I said this before. What do you think about the GOP senatorial scare tactics that they're now using about anything that Democrats have an idea to do? These existential threats to the GOP ethos. Why is DC not a state? Why is Puerto Rico not a state? Why do we still use the Electoral College?
Mm-hmm. I thought you were going to say electric chair.
These are right. Well, one's metaphorical and the other's like a real thing for the GOP, you know? Mm-hmm. Like my governing priorities for 2021 is I'd love to see a reestablishment of the rule of law.
That's not going to happen.
Well,
that's a long-term wish. That's a long-term fantasy.
Does Biden turn into Obama and then refuse to engage in the political hardball that GOP has coming?
It depends on the pressure from the left. There's going to be a lot of pressure to get even. And he's going to try to retreat into this let's make everybody come together narrative, which is going to disappoint a lot of people like you and I.
Isn't it not a leftist thing? Isn't it just mainstream to want to see the country return to normal?
I think we've gotten to the point where the left has become as rabid as the right has.
Yeah,
a good thing, and I think you and I agree on that they have to.
Yeah. So I'm watching my Facebook feed yesterday, and thank you so much for alerting the world to the Maria Bartiromo interview on Fox. Maria Bartiromo, we got to get to. But Jack, I want to play a little sound clip for you. You ready for a sound clip?
I am.
This is from our friends at Midas Touch, our friends that invented the hashtag Diaper Don. Let's let it play to its fullest, shall we?
They did dumps. They call them dumps, big, massive dumps. People are flushing toilets 10 times, 15 times, as opposed to once. They end up using more water.
What the fuck is going through his brain? I mean, it's fucking Disneyland in there, man.
Massive dumps.
Oh.
They're doing a massive dump on my reputation. I mean democracy.
Right. So to let our viewers know, all three of them, to let our viewers know, we have paid, or me as the producer, has paid for certain features in this BeLive app that Seth is learning how to use, like being able to run up photos, being able to run up eventually videos and audio. So we're becoming more like a professional broadcast entity.
Well, how about this little sound clip? Let's let this one run, and then we can talk about it. Okay, this is the aforementioned Maria Bartiromo, who, it's got to be rightly pointed out, Maria Bartiromo, prior to her involvement with Fox News, used to be considered a really credible financial reporter. She'd go onto the floor of the stock exchange, and she'd push herself around, and she'd force people to answer questions as they noted exactly this morning. And this is what she's been reduced to.
Where is the DOJ and the FBI in all of this, Mr. President? You have laid out some serious charges here. Shouldn't this be something that the FBI is investigating? Are they? Is the DOJ investigating?
Missing in action. Can't tell you where they are. I ask, are they looking at it? Everyone says yes, they're looking at it.
Everyone.
Look, where are they with Comey, McCabe, and all these other people? You know, I said I'll stay out of it. I wish I didn't make that statement. There's no reason really why I have to. But where are they with Comey, with McCabe, with Brennan, with all these people? They lied to Congress. They lied. They leaked. They spied in our campaign. I see Carter Page is bringing a lawsuit. That's good news. Where are they with all of this stuff? And, you know, what happened to Durham? Where's Durham? So, you know, you're asking me a question. These people have been there a long time. And I know FBI, and FBI is great at the levels that we talk about. But it's inconceivable. You would think if you're in the FBI or Department of Justice, this is the biggest thing you could be looking at. Where are they? I've not seen anything. I mean, they just keep moving along, and they go on to the next president. They've been there for a long time. People don't understand this. They've been there for a long time. Some of them have served a lot of different presidents, and they have their own views. All I can say is I haven't heard, with all of the fraud that's taken place, nobody's come to me and said, oh, the FBI's nabbed, you know, the people that are doing this scheme. The FBI is looking at Dominion, which nobody even knows where they're based, which nobody even knows where the votes are counted. You know, the votes in Dominion, they say, are counted in foreign countries, okay? Can you believe this? Now, no. Dominion is also based in a number of foreign countries. One of them is Canada. And Canada refuses to use Dominion, and they're based there. They won't get anywhere near. Texas will not get anywhere near Dominion.
That's the Dominion Republic he's talking about, Seth?
No, not the Dominion Republic. The Dominion actual ballot machines.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes.
Voting machines.
That little fucker that never worked right? Only in the blue states it didn't work.
Right.
You know?
Right. That's, you know, that's like that's what Trump thinks is going on. That's what Trump is trying to convince his followers is happening, that Dominion is fraudulently switching tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of votes to the Biden campaign from the Trump campaign. So last night, you know, on 60 Minutes, the wonderful CISA, is that the name of the organization that
organization, right?
Yeah, the federal organization that was responsible for coming up with the guy who was fired, whose name is Chris Krebs.
Yes.
He went on 60 Minutes to discuss why the vote was not hackable this year. And basically what he said was, hey, it was all paper ballots.
Mm.
You know, we had paper ballots, and they were all, you know, traceable.
You know what I think, Seth? I think in the future, the next big horror movie we're going to see, King Kong type movie, that's Dominion meets Megalon.
I mean, you know, the mentality that would be like, that you would have to believe this is so dangerous.
And there's 72 million of those morons out there. So here's the other thing. Before she interviewed Trump, did you see Kelly Loeffler? Is that her name on there?
I did.
Where do they find, the Republicans find these women who are able to have one eye on camera one and one eye on camera two at the same time?
What is that? What is that?
Some kind of myopia?
I see what you did there. It's some kind of opia.
I mean, what's her name? You know, his original spokesman had that same thing, that she could watch camera one and see when it switched to camera three at the same time.
Kellyanne.
No. start with an H, middle name H, daughter of the senator.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Yes, she had that same ability.
Disability?
Yes, or ability, depending on.
At a certain point, when you saw Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and then you saw Stephen Miller, and now you see these people. Thank you, Jimmy. When you see these people.
Jimmy, hi.
Let me ask you a question. Did it start to worry you, Jack, that you had a group of people involved in the Trump campaign, which all looked like they had lost their deal with the devil?
They went down to the crossroads. They tried to make a deal. They got dusted by an F Ford 150 with a Trump sticker on it. And somehow that deal went through. Now, what did they get in that deal?
Mitch McConnell had got ghastly purple hands that we talked about last week. What happened to these people? Why so many physically impaired? Or, I mean, we used to have used to think that Trump valued the way people looked so much. He got the ugliest bastards in the world he possibly could, and it's not even an administration thing. Now in the legislative branch, this Kelly Loeffler.
Yeah,
she's fabulously wealthy, though, isn't she?
This is, as she says, the wall against socialism. This election, the Senate election, she is the wall against socialism. Can you believe that people really believe that shit?
Well, I believe that she's the wall eye against socialism.
Yes.
Too much?
No, I think it's okay.
I don't know. I mean, I'm optically challenged too.
Ask F. Jimmy or Alan if that was too much. Or Alan, sorry.
Yeah. Jimmy, too much that Kelly Loeffler is the wall eye against socialism? That interview, her interview before Trump went on with Maria Bartiromo, which you're talking about, was freaking brilliant. It was long on accusations, just as Trump's interview was, and short on actual fact.
Yes. Now, you know what the problem, I want to tell everybody that I bought a brand new camera. That's why I'm so sharp. And I also bought a ring light that can change color temperature. The problem with ring lights with glasses is that you see the ring in the eye. And so if you look at with fashion photography, if you see that ring, you see they're using a ring light, which takes out all shadows if it were more powerful.
Are you comparing, are you assuming that you're somehow now on the same level as fashion photography? Is that what you're suggesting to us?
You know, a person who was basically a little dim could interpret it like that.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to put the tack in that, and we're going to pick it up. Good morning, Martha.
Hi, Martha. Welcome back.
I was speaking with Martha offline this week. Martha is an artist. She did a fantastic portrait of President Trump, and she has been inspired to do a series of pieces, 90% of which are abstract, on her take on the Trump administration. So what we're going to do is we're going to have Martha put together a show for us, and we'll have her on, and we'll talk about her artwork. So
we're talking about Seth is inviting John Bielenberg to join us, who is probably, if he's on, listen, guys, there's one thing we can't do with the software. We can't tell who's watching. So if you want to let us know that you're there, please just make a comment like Martha did, said hi guys or hi or something, and then we can engage with you. And that's very important.
Jack, our friends at Gallup, the polling company.
I worked there for 3 months.
By the way, shouldn't we be shorting any polling company stock, the uselessness of modern polling?
I think probably so. I think probably so. Certainly, we're shorting Trump, which
without question, and we're shorting Trumpism. And the question still remains: does this bastard end up in the Hooskow, and when? Because despite the Jimmy says, I'm not watching. The I comment was just too much. Sure thing, Jim. We'll see you in the thread.
Comment.
So polling, an art form of the past. It's impossible to gauge. Trump voter, Trumpist authoritarian attitudes. It's almost as if authoritarians won't admit that they are authoritarians to a professional pollster, or they're quiet or whatever. It's impossible to quantify. And yet, if you look at the popular vote, 80 million to 72 million, that's a 10-point differential.
Well, 538, Seth, almost got it right. I mean, obviously not.
How come I had a heart attack on election eve? How come it was at? Hey, Kim and Alex.
Write-in ballots.
Alex the Greek is watching, Jack.
Oh no! Oh gosh!
No, your initial response was right. Oh no, this is terrible.
So we call. You're familiar with Cockney rhyming slang, and you have to excuse me, Seth, because we discussed this ad infinitum. But in one of Guy Ritchie's films, there was a Greek, and so they used Cockney rhyming slang to name him. Wonderful rhyming slang, and that's what we do with Alex. Oh, Kim is on. It's not. It's Kim, and so we would call Alex the Greek rhymes with bubble and squeak in England, so you call Alex Bubbles.
Bubbles.
I want to ask.
But if you read the fine print,
yes,
you would notice that Alex and Kim are watching. Alex is glad Jack took his photography class. SMI, you're much better lit now, and you have Alex to thank for that, as well as the frame.
Oh, I love that. That's absolutely priceless.
Yeah. Greetings to Jimmy Mays, who's been providing us with all sorts of good content for the show. I don't know if now is the time, but David Brooks's article is op-ed in the New York Times about the psychology of the Trump voter, and the universe that person lives in is fascinating. Despite that, Gallup, the aforementioned Gallup, in terms of favorability, unfavorability, Biden's favorability rises to 55%. Of course, he's just wandering around playing with his dog and breaking his ankle. And Trump dips to 42%.
Whoa.
So 42% being Trump's essential bottom. I've never seen a guy vacillate more between 46 and 42% in my life in the Oval Office. He's got a hard bottom at 42%.
Yeah, but the thing is ultimately, Seth, 42%. Please, you know how many millions that is? I mean, that is really fucking depressing.
Just ask the South Africans, bro.
So I wanted to mention once again, Alex, because they're both on, which is great, guys. Are we happy about the election or what?
Alex is happy about the election. I'm guessing Alex's brother is not happy about the election. And I would love to hear some of the phraseology that he's been throwing around the house. What are some of the kooky conspiracies that Alex the Greek's brother has been coming up with to describe the rotting of the Republican mind? Jimmy thinks that COVID is making a dent in the approval rating of Trump. Jim, is that because the news is finally penetrating the bubble, or because so many of those fuckers are sick that they can't come to the phone to take a message and be polled? Jack, what else is in the news?
Okay, well, there are a number of things I'm sure that you would love to touch on. Obviously, the remote control machine gun is pretty cool.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
The remote control machine gun is fantastic. So the Iranians, because I guess they're incapable of defending their top scientists. If you're Iran, and you have some human assets that are necessary for you to continue being the repugnant douchebags on the world stage that you've been these 40 years. One of them is your state-sponsored terrorism mastermind, General whatever his name was. And the other is the Robert Oppenheimer of your nuclear program, a nuclear program which ostensibly is to turn Iran, which I guess in the Middle East, the hierarchy of Islamic countries, Iran is the number one country in the hierarchy of Islamic countries.
That's the United States of the Middle East.
I mean, this is the birthplace of Rumi. I mean, these are the thinking people of the Middle East. Why is this guy wandering around on a road waiting to get killed by a frickin' Walter White style remote control machine gun that the Mossad puts up in broad daylight?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think that obviously Trump depends on Israel for a lot of things like this. And I was enamored by the thumb drive attack on their centrifuges. I thought that was much more subtle and cool and much more, of course, Bibi. You know, Trump calls Bibi, says, Bibi, I got a problem. They won't let me bomb Iraq. And Bibi says, and Trump says, Bibi, how about a mission? And Bibi goes, oh, a mission. And
no, not even. They send Pompeo over for a visit.
Yeah, well, yes, to present the mission. Yes.
Pompeo went over just like 3 weeks ago.
Right. But back to the centrifuge thing, what do they call it? Stuxnet?
Yeah.
Stuxnet, where they found out, the Israelis, with the help of the Americans, that one of their scientists would download music on a thumb drive, even though he wasn't allowed to, and take it into work and listen to it. So they designed some downloads, particularly for him, that had a Trojan horse in it. And as soon as he started listening to it, it would download this code into the computer that eventually spun up all the centrifuges past the red line and blew the fuck up. How brilliant is that?
That's fabulous. But can you imagine Monday morning's meeting at HR with that guy? Listen, Ahmed, I don't know how many times we had to talk to you about this.
Yeah.
Now, in America, you know, you just get your walk-in papers.
Yeah.
In a theocracy where you're running the state-sponsored nuclear program and you set them back 10 years, your kid's puppy is going to be lunch.
Yeah. You know, and there's a wonderful story that I read, which I think it was during the Reagan administration. There was a huge explosion in Eastern Russia, in the Urals. I mean, just huge, almost nuclear, huge. And nobody knew what it was. And Reagan invited the NSA into the office and said, do you guys know what this was? And they couldn't really lie to him. And they said, well, Mr. President, nobody knows this, but this is the deal. We know for years that the Russians have been trying to steal software from the United States that controls the flow of pipelines, because they're shipping in all this gas and that they want this software. We knew they wanted it, so we designed a special version that we let them steal. And given certain circumstances, a high flow in one direction and valve does this and this does this, temperature control this, when it hit a certain point, it would basically start backflowing on itself. And that was the explosion. And I thought that was just one of the most brilliant spy stories.
Jim, you raise a good point. Thank God less than a dozen people watch this at any one time. Otherwise, I'd be in deep shit.
Seth and I, the next step now, paying for this service, is going to be to hire a lawyer, right, Seth?
Yeah.
It's not going to be a Camden lawyer. It's
Let's just make sure. But speaking of the Trumpists, Jack, let's play this little news clip from a woman in a bank in, I don't know, is it California? So she's at a Citibank. Oh, excuse me, not California. This lady is at a Citibank in Inglewood, New Jersey.
Oh.
Inglewood, New Jersey. And I'm going to play you the audio. And what I'm going to show you, it's basically a cell phone camera that somebody recorded this diatribe with. It lasts about 1:21 seconds. And here is the level of motivation of the Trumpist mask deniers. This is a woman that refused to wear a mask at a Citibank branch in Inglewood, New Jersey, and she informs the tellers of some very important information about herself and why she shouldn't be forced to wear a mask. So here's a lady in Inglewood online.
Call them here because I will take this all the way. I am going now to court to fight masks, and you are not going to tell me what to do. Stand 6 feet away from me and do your social. No, more. You want to be safe? Stand 6 feet away from me. Okay, that's it. Give me your card with your name because this branch is going to hear your name. You're going to become famous. Do it now. You work for me. I do not work for you. I've been a customer since 1990. Were you born then? Shame on you.
Wow.
Very lucky she's not here because she knows me well. Your boss. Count your days. Bully. What? This is giving you the right to be a bully? Because you're brainwashed? I'm a scientist. There is no corona. Don't make me wear your mask. Are you crazy? Are you trying to kill me? What happens if you have corona? Did you just say you're trying to kill me? I want to know because we're on camera. Did you just suggest for me to wear your dirty mask? Because I think you did. Give me your name and your number now. You're done. You are done.
This is what happens, Seth.
Count your days.
Yeah.
Is every Trump supporter turning into a supervillain now? Count your days.
I think it's more like some kind of medieval Luddite. But seriously, Seth, this is like when you go on a film shoot and you start loading in and everything, the cameras and the dollies and stuff off the truck, and the janitor would come up and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "We're shooting so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so." And he would say, "Well, nobody told me." This is the idea that everybody thinks that their voice is important as any other, which is democracy at work. But we have given them a megaphone, like the cell phone. We've given them a megaphone to start screaming their insanity. What do we do about this?
Okay, so I mean, it's not like so. What does this mean for us? Electorally, what's going to happen to these people? Where are they gonna? Where are they gonna go to? What's gonna because that lady's gonna vote, right? Mm-hmm. That lady's gonna vote. So you remember Jeff Greenfield from ABC News? He was a political correspondent years ago. Well, here is what I'm going to rearrange the screens here, Jackie boy. Sure. Here is what Jeff Greenfield looks like now. A very old-looking, haggard Jeff Greenfield.
Well, the lighting doesn't help him, Seth. Look at that nose. That's all backed up like.
Give me 1 second here, Jackie. But look at that.
I wouldn't look that.
Jeff Greenfield. Really, and so the question this morning on MSNBC, what's the state of American democracy? Okay, So Jeff Greenfield says something that we've been saying on this show for the past week. He says, you know what's going to happen? That lady in Englewood, New Jersey, that lady on the bank line in Englewood, New Jersey, she's going to go and vote. And if there was an election for a state Secretary of State, and now that that's on the Trumpist radar, if there's an election for Secretary of State in these states, which one gets elected? The Secretary of State that's the Trumpist Secretary of State, or the Secretary of State that is, you know, just the run-of-the-mill bureaucrat Democrat that excites absolutely nobody when they show up on the ballot? The Republicans have a real advantage when it comes to installing the Bolsheviks of fascism. You know, these one-party rule authoritarians.
One voters, provincial,
The Tea Party lunatics who are disconnected from the reality of the responsibilities of their office. You know, they wink a little bit when they take their oath of office. They're not, you know, beholden to the Constitution. They're beholden to white power and authoritarianism.
So before we talk about education and linear thinking, I thought we'd talk about ADD and the moment that Alex, the Greek, was fixing your BMW and decided to do a little painting inside the valve cover.
Craziest thing I've ever seen. I wish I had the picture, but that is the level of, now that's not just Alex the Greek.
Tell people the story, because first of all, to preface it, Alex is one of the most genius mechanics on anything.
No, I think Alex the Greek is the smartest in terms of how a technical mind works.
Yes.
Alex the Greek is easily the most gifted human being I've ever met.
He's the Einstein of mechanical forensics and digital forensics. So Seth is going to tell you what he did.
It's real simple. When you open up a mid or late 80s BMW or any BMW, all of the parts are actually embossed in the aluminum parts. They're embossed with the BMW logo, but it's just in relief, you know, kind of like, ironically enough, like it would be on a gravestone.
But it's on the underside of the cover, so you can't.
On the underside of the valve cover. So ultimately, it's exposed, but ultimately, anybody who looks down on top of the motor is not going to see it, right? Never will. By definition, you'd have to take the motor apart to see this one part. I show up, Alex says, let me show you something. He takes me over and shows me the part in the motor, in the cover, that is not visible from the top, that you'd have to be a mechanic to see after 6 hours of taking this thing apart. He took white and blue paint, enamel, heat-resistant enamel, and painted in the BMW logo in white and blue so that it matched the BMW corporate logo that's painted elsewhere, like on the hood. And then he closed it up. And I said, what the fuck are you doing? And he said, one day someone is going to take this motor apart and they're going to see this and they're going to wonder how the fuck this happened. And that is the kind of thing that Alex will entertain himself for. It entertains me every time I drive the car. I think about it.
Which leads us to this wonderful video that you recommended that I watch, which you will probably, why don't you address the idea when it comes to education?
Yeah. So this is it's a show unto itself, but I'm not sure how many people have seen the the RSA speech, the speech that Sir Ken Robinson gave to the Royal Society of the Arts. in which he discusses, and you know what? I think I can do this. RSA Animate, Changing Paradigms in Education. And if I'm not mistaken, I think this is a YouTube video. So it is also Sir Ken Robinson's TED Talk, but it is an 11-minute long, and so we have to discuss. Gee, do we put it up? Do we include it in this show? I think it's worthwhile. You want to show a video and then come back and talk about it?
No, I think we're going to lose some people. So what I would do is recommend seeing it. If you can put up the link, it's great.
So I will. I'll put up the link in the. I'm pretty sure I can put up the link in the description. But Ken Robinson gave a speech to the RSA in which essentially he predicted the change in which hemisphere of the brain you think in will become dominant in society. So the question becomes, how was our educational system conceived, and for what purpose was it applied? And what damage has this done to our culture? Because if you think about it, the kids that are in American schools today are not gathered together by interest. They're in some cases segmented by gender. They are entirely organized by date of manufacture. In other words, the year they were born, what year you were in school, regardless of your aptitude. They're gathered together regardless of what their learning aptitudes are, what they would be best at. And this has resulted in a culture of drug use and self-medication and misdiagnosis and frustrated people and Trump supporters. You can't spend your entire life being told that you're no good at something when you're actually really good at something, and expect to be validated from that.
And what it's done, it has caused a plethora of people to only be good at linear thinking and very few at, what do they call it? Not diagonal, but he had a great expression for it. It's basically the idea, I think, that John Bielenberg would come up with, is think long. Their powers of divergent thinking have been squashed by the educational system. And if I can just add one thing, Seth, to that is, there is a lot of resentment on the right with Trumpers against the fact that kids they knew who were hippies are the ones that are making the big bucks.
Yeah, we talked about this on your Facebook page the other day, didn't we?
Well, yes, exactly. So all these kids that were nerds, even the ones that dropped out of Harvard, Gates, Zuckerberg, they said, fuck this. This isn't for me. And they go on, a lot of them, to become incredibly successful. The resentment that must cause. This is the kid that you never let, he'd be the last one picked for the baseball team. Maybe he'd get beat up occasionally. Those ended up being the successful ones. What does that say about school, the culture of school?
You know what? We can actually have a commentary about this as we go. Let's see if it works.
Okay.
Let's listen and see if this is fruitful for people. And you and I will just sit here and maybe we can throw a comment in periodically, okay?
Sure.
Every country on earth at the moment is reforming public education. There are two reasons for it. The first one is economic. People are trying to work out, how do we educate our children to take their place in the economies of the 21st century? How do we do that? Given that we can't anticipate what the economy will look like at the end of next week, as the recent turmoil is demonstrating. How do we do that? The second, though, is cultural. Every country on earth is trying to figure out how do we educate our children so they have a sense of cultural identity and so that we can pass on the cultural genes of our communities while being part of the process of globalization. How do we square that circle? The problem is they're trying to meet the future by doing what they did in the past. And on the way, they're alienating millions of kids who don't see any purpose in going to school. When we went to school, we were kept there with a story, which was if you worked hard and did well and got a college degree, you'd have a job. Our kids don't believe that. And they're right not to, by the way. You're better having a degree than not, but it's not a guarantee anymore. And particularly not if the route to it marginalizes most of the things that you think are important about yourself. Some people say we have to raise standards if this is a breakthrough. Like really, yes, we should. Why would you lower them? I can come across an argument that persuades me of lowering them. But raising them, of course we should raise them. The problem is that the current system of education was designed and conceived and structured for a different age. It was conceived in the intellectual culture of the Enlightenment and in the economic circumstances of the Industrial Revolution. Before the middle of the 19th century, there were no systems of public education. Not really. I mean, you can get educated by Jesuits, if you have the money. But public education, paid for from taxation, compulsory to everybody and free at the point of delivery, that was a revolutionary idea. And many people objected to it. They said it's not possible for many street kids, working class children, to benefit from public education. They're incapable of learning to read and write, and why are we spending time on this? So there's also built into it a whole series of assumptions about social structure and capacity. It was driven by an economic imperative of the time, but running right through it was an intellectual model of the mind, which was essentially the Enlightenment view of intelligence. That real intelligence consists in the capacity for a certain type of deductive reasoning and a knowledge of the classics originally, what we come to think of as academic ability. And this is deep in the gene pool of public education, that there are really two types of people, academic and non-academic, smart people and non-smart people. And the consequence of that is that many brilliant people think they're not, because they've been judged against this particular view of the mind. So we have twin pillars, economic and intellectual. And my view is that this model has caused chaos in many people's lives. It's been great for some. There have been people who have benefited wonderfully from it. But most people have not. Instead, they suffer this. This is the modern epidemic, and it's as misplaced and it's as fictitious. This is the plague of ADHD. Now, this is a map of the incidence of ADHD in America, or prescriptions for ADHD. Don't mistake me here. I don't mean to say there is no such thing as attention deficit disorder. I'm not qualified to say if there is such a thing. I know that a great majority of psychologists and paediatricians think there is such a thing. But it's still a matter of debate. What I do know for a fact is it's not an epidemic. These kids are being medicated as routinely as we had our tonsils taken out. And on the same whimsical basis, and for the same reason, medical fashion. Our children are living in the most intensely stimulating period in the history of the earth. They're being besieged with information and calls for their attention from every platform, computers, from iPhones, from advertising holdings, from hundreds of television channels. And we're penalizing them now for getting distracted. From what? Boring stuff. At school, for the most part. It seems to me it's not a coincidence totally that the incidence of ADHD has risen in parallel with the growth of standardized testing. Now, these kids are being given Ritalin and Adderall and all manner of things, often quite dangerous drugs, to get them focused and calm them down. But according to this, attention deficit disorder increases as you travel east across the country. People start losing interest in Oklahoma. They can hardly think straight in Arkansas. And by the time they get to Washington, they've lost it completely. And there are separate reasons for that, I believe. It's a fictitious epidemic. if you think of it, the arts, and I don't say this exclusively of the arts, I think it's also true of science and of maths, but I say about the arts particularly because they are the victims of this mentality currently, particularly. The arts especially address the idea of aesthetic experience. An aesthetic experience is one in which your senses are operating at their peak, when you're present in the current moment, when you're resonating with the excitement of this thing that you're experiencing, when you are fully alive. An anesthetic is when you shut your senses off and deaden yourself to what's happening. And a lot of these drugs are that. We're getting our children through education by anesthetizing them. And I think we should be doing the exact opposite. We shouldn't be putting them asleep. We should be waking them up to what they have inside of themselves. But the model we have is this. I believe we have a system of education that is modeled on the interests of industrialism and in the image of it. I'll give you a couple of examples. Schools are still pretty much organized on factory lines, ringing bells, separate facilities, specialized into separate subjects. We still educate children by batches. We put them through the system by age group. Why do we do that? Why is there this assumption that the most important thing kids have in common is how old they are? It's like the most important thing about them is their date of manufacture. You know what I mean? Well, I know kids who are much better than other kids at the same age in different disciplines, or at different times of the day, or better in smaller groups than in large groups, or sometimes they want to be on their own. If you're interested in the model of learning, you don't start from this production line mentality. It's essentially about conformity, and increasingly it's about that as you look at the growth of standardized testing and standardized curricula. And it's about standardization. I believe we've got to go in the exact opposite direction. That's what I mean about changing the paradigm. There was a great study done recently of divergent thinking. Published a couple of years ago. Divergent thinking isn't the same thing as creativity. I define creativity as the process of having original ideas that have value. Divergent thinking isn't a synonym, but it's an essential capacity for creativity. It's the ability to see lots of possible answers to a question, lots of possible ways of interpreting a question, to think what Edward de Bono would probably call laterally, to think not just in linear or convergent ways, to see multiple answers, not one. So, there are tests for this. One kind of cod example would be people might be asked to say, how many uses can you think of for a paperclip? One of those routine questions. Most people might come up with 10 or 15. People who are good at this might come up with 200. And they do that by saying, well, could the paperclip be 200 foot tall and be made out of foam rubber? Does it have to be a paperclip as we know it, Jim? Be a paperclip as we know it, Jim? Now, there are tests for this, and they gave them to 1,500 people. This is in a book called Breakpoint and Beyond. And on the protocol of the test, if you scored above a certain level, you'd be considered to be a genius at divergent thinking. Okay? So my question to you is, what percentage of the people tested, of the 1,500, scored at genius level for divergent thinking? Now, you need to know one more thing about them. These were kindergarten children. So what do you think? What percentage at genius level? 80. 80, okay. 98%. Now, the thing about this was it was a longitudinal study. So they retested the same children 5 years later, ages of 8 to 10. What do you think? 50? They retested them again 5 years later, ages 13 to 15. You can see a trend here, can't you? Now, this tells an interesting story, because you could have imagined it going the other way, couldn't you? You start off not being very good, but you get better as you get older. But this shows two things. One is we all have this capacity, and two, it mostly deteriorates. Now, a lot of things have happened to these kids as they've grown up. A lot. But one of the most important things that happened to them, I'm convinced, is that by now they've become educated. They've spent 10 years at school being told there's one answer, it's at the back. And don't look. And don't copy, because that's cheating. Outside schools, that's called collaboration, but inside schools. Now, this isn't because teachers want it this way, it's just because it happens that way. It's because it's in the gene pool of education. We have to think differently about human capacity. We have to get over this old conception of academic, non-academic, abstract, theoretical, vocational, and see it for what it is, a myth. Secondly, we have to recognize that most great learning happens in groups, that collaboration is the stuff of growth. If we atomize people and separate them and judge them separately, we form a kind of disjunction between them and their natural learning environment. And thirdly, it's crucially about the culture of our institutions, the habits of the institution and the habitats that they occupy.
I mean,
Are you back, Seth?
Yeah, is that not fantastic?
It is genius. I just want to add one thing to this. I'm not really adding it, I'm commenting on it. And that is that in any professional creative environment, people have the mistaken idea that ideas come to individuals. But if you go into any creative environment, whether it's an advertising session on ideas and commercials or what you're going to do, which I was privy to, or feature films, the most important part of the development of an idea is in a group. It is never, never by yourself. Okay? So to think that this genius in some, there are some singular cases, I think Stephen King, obviously Einstein, and extreme examples, Da Vinci, but in general, great ideas, they're not stolen. What they are is that when people get together, they trigger great ideas in each other. And that is supremely important because you have to get rid of your ego in a situation like that.
Well, very much like he found it, Jack.
What is it?
Alex the Greek found it.
Seth, I am stunned. I am absolutely stunned because when I saw that, I mean, please, this is under the valve cover, right?
It is. It is. And he is correct. He is absolutely right. The inspiration was individual. He came up with this idea.
Yes, but keep in mind, Seth, everything is derivative.
Right.
Whether you know it or not, everything is
sharing it with his own village.
Right. But the thing about it is, it doesn't make it worth less. There are cultures in the world, and this is where America has a real problem, Western civilization. There are cultures in the world that believe that inspiration comes from somewhere else, and the only credit you can take for that idea is you were, like Lawrence of Arabia felt the same thing, that he was a pipeline for ideas. It wasn't generated inside him. And that cultural vision of where creativity comes from is so much healthier than you and I saying, oh, Seth, you stole that idea from me, or I had that idea first. And that's so much of it, but it's so much against the American mythology. You know what I mean? It's just where the individual has to take credit. Let's pretend for a second that the individual is only a pipeline for things. You can take credit for being a pipeline, but don't ever take credit for the idea, because no matter how you're thinking or when you thought it, it was derivative of something else. And that's why all great ideas come from groups.
Well, where the hell are we going to share it anyway? Where do we want our idea of validation? I would love for there to be 10,000 people watching the show right now, but what I really love is the fact that my buddies are watching the show right now.
And keep in mind, it gets back to this, Seth. The reason we are so stimulated by having coffee at Point McKay, which is something we can't do now, is because that's exactly what it is. The ideas that are generated are so much better than the ideas we could generate individually. Jimmy, goodbye. I know you have to go. And by the way, Pete said, go Bears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently, Pete didn't watch Trubisky last night. Otherwise, nobody would have. By the way, speaking of when we can get back together again, um, just as an aside, Moderna has not only is their vaccine, which admittedly has a couple of side effects that might be a little bit onerous, but Moderna, they did a 30,000 person trial. No one who got their vaccine in the trial developed severe COVID-19.
Well, that's interesting, but keep in mind that they were working with Pfizer. This is not a separate thing. This is like all hands on deck working together with other companies.
Granted, they've got like enough doses for all the frontline workers, to be done by Christmas, apparently.
Right.
And we're talking about the creation when we're watching Sir Ken Robinson's fantastic talk to the RSA. It's worth noting Ken Robinson died in August, and Ken Robinson wrote a book that you can buy on Amazon, and the book is absolutely fantastic. You can buy the audio book for like $17 or so, but the book is called The Element. How finding your passion changes everything. And I got to tell you that I think the struggle for adults in this post-industrial revolution world is the struggle to find one's voice. And I got to tell you that there is now, this time indoors where the workplace has fast forwarded 10 years. If you ask Chris Walker Spencer, as you rightly pointed out the other day, Chris Walker Spencer, the principal of our local intermediate school here, elementary school, what we call it. If you ask him, his agenda for change has been fast forwarded, 10 years in the past 10 months. The thing that has been most remarkable to people is all of the assumptions of your success, that the deal that you bought into, that if you go and sit in these rooms and listen to these people and do these things and take these tests, that the results for you may or may not be guaranteed. Since that bet is off and people see the falsity of that, they see the falsehood of that. And where is it most accurately represented and advocated for, but with conservatives in our culture that resist change?
Let me comment on that. I taught at the high school for 10 years with Chris.
Until they kicked you out, right?
It took 10 years. The fact that I could behave myself for that long. I mean, Chris did get a couple of, as we call it, advertising Catholic mail, which are letters of complaining about something. Anyway, advertising, they call it Catholic mail. The thing about it was, and this is one thing that I stress when I teach, is that the first thing, one of the most important things is you cannot anymore base your career on a hero that you found that you want to emulate. For instance, you don't find the best cinematographer in the world and say, I want to be him, and then work for 20 years to become him, because he will not exist by the time you get there. And
Right.
It's such an important point, because everybody has heroes, and yet these heroes, their jobs will not exist in 20 years. So don't aim at something that's not going to be there. It's like watching the light of a star that's 1 billion years old. The star's not there. And that's a very important thing to learn. And coupled with that, as that video showed, is that in the future, this rock star idea creator is not going to exist. It's going to be a group. And ad agencies and Hollywood and their story conferences, they've already got this down. They know how creativity works, the process of creativity. So your value is not the ideas that you come up with necessarily. It's your ability to stimulate and trigger ideas in other people. And their value to me is if they evolution, yes. Their value in me is to stimulate me to have yet another great idea. And this is something you and I, Seth, when we're on the phone every day for an hour and a half, this is something we stimulate in each other. The reason we're such good friends is we stimulate the other person to bring it up a notch, not bring it down or leave it there, but bring it up a notch.
Like, imagine if Johann had decided that he wanted to go into something other than film and decided that he wanted to be an architect.
Right.
Can you imagine the impact that would be on him emotionally and professionally if he had spent, if his aptitude for hand-eye coordination and rendering things artistically and building with that desire, you know, that's my business, is reimagining the housing of the future. Can you imagine if Johann had decided that he wanted to be an architect? Did you know that technology, artificial intelligence, and the Internet of Things is rendering modern architecture 90% of modern architects will be unemployed because of advances in technology.
I agree. Now,
and the results of those advances will be better for 99.9999% of the human population who aren't architects. But the guarantee of employment through education for those people who started on that pathway and then had that goal truncated at the 11th hour is these changes don't take place in our culture without victims and consequences. Then it just so happens that you and I feel that the Trump voter is a victim and consequence of this exact change that we're talking about.
I agree. And Johann, as an example, Johann works as a sound man on films in Stockholm. He was fabulously interested in audio for a long time. And you know how he got interested in it, Seth? I gave him one of my old Macs computers, and he found Audio Logic on it. He started looking at what it did. It's a sequencer sound design program, wonderful one. And he started playing with it. And that moment was his exposure to the whole rest of his life. Just a fluke, Seth, that he discovered this piece of software on my computer.
How do we reconcile all of these changes coming with the economic changes? I sent you an article this morning. We were talking about the article in Politico about what Atlantic City looks like now.
Oh.
You know, kind of Atlantic City, the hub of, you know, kind of the hub of 1980s architecture. And, bad buildings typified by the ghastly Trump Taj Mahal.
Yeah.
You know, for the architects who cheated there. Now the streets are desolate. The unemployment rate is many times the national average. 1 out of every 3 people in AC is unemployed. The beaches are desolate. It's kind of gone back to that, if David Dinkins were the mayor of America.
Yeah.
Kind of
Here's the thing about Atlantic, Seth. Here's the thing about Atlantic City. It's always been a facade in this respect. They sold the idea of casinos, what it would do for the town and everything like this. If you've been to Atlantic City, you walk 2 blocks away from the beach and it's a ghetto. Atlantic City is a mirage.
But it was a mirage that was built for, it's where people live.
Right.
People exist there. They go to the grocery store there. But those same people are as displaced by these modern changes as that person that went to Cooper Union for architecture.
Absolutely. And
so
what
do we do with all these displaced people? And are we joking ourselves when we think that the election of Biden fixes everything? Because it doesn't.
Well, as you pointed out, one of the ways we dealt with in the past was land wars.
Well, that's the way we got rid of. That's the way we got rid of, a segment of society that otherwise wouldn't. Since the invention of the nuclear bomb, show me the land war that cleaved chunks of our culture or crippled chunks of our population. It just doesn't exist anymore.
And imagine that you're young, you're confused by all this, you don't understand it, you're confused by it. You decide to join the military. What do you have? You have 3 squares a day. You have an authoritarian system where you can advance. You can wear the corporal stripes or the sergeant stripes, time and grade, blah, 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 the different combat infantry. Here comes.
Pete is making a 400-year-old witch burning joke.
Oh, Pete, don't do this to me. You make me feel like an idiot when you go off on things like this.
That's okay. That's why I put it up, so that you feel like an idiot.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. But you pointed this out to me a year ago, Seth, and it was amazing, is what does a culture do with people who want to kill?
Well, I mean, in the past, we sent them out. The other thing about it, the interesting thing about it's almost like the conservatives in our culture require an underclass that they can put at war with itself.
Shake it out. You keep talking.
In order to keep themselves in power. Like, we had 2 things happen at the same time: the invention of the nuclear bomb, and then 25 years later or 20 years later, the invention of birth control, which empowered women sexually. And in terms of our population, that and the coincidental adoption of Roe versus Wade, which gave women dominion over their own bodies sexually as well, retroactively, we had entire generations of unwanted people that were never born in this country. They just didn't show up. So if you look at Roe versus Wade decision, and then you look at what happened 20 years after that, where during the Clinton administration, the crime rates in this country dropped precipitously. There's a lot of unwanted people that were poorly adjusted that were never born. So you got to ask yourself, what happens,
So let me address Jim's comment. Jim, Jim, let me address your comment. You're right. And because Vietnam, we all know, I mean, we're all children of Vietnam, the Vietnam era. You, Jim, who flew a jet, Peter was probably the last Marine off the embassy roof in Saigon. You know it more intimately than I do, obviously. But we're all a product of that Vietnam demonstration. And no, you have to teach a lot of human beings to kill. And the way you do it, I mean, we've all been through basic guys where the chaplain gives you talk about why it's okay to kill the Greeks. Remember that? And also the fact that they put you in a situation where you have to kill because, one, you are threatened, or the guys that you're with are threatened, your friends. And of course, the Army is very smart. And the Marines, and in general, they force you to believe that you have to kill to protect you and your friend, whereas in fact, really who you're protecting is Exxon. Okay, this is what they do. It's very smart. They're not stupid. And of course, nobody necessarily went in wanting to kill. I know a few people that did, but that's not the thing. But they can train you very easily. They're good at it. They've had centuries of practice of teaching you why you want to kill.
So you want to fast forward this time machine now to the Trump era, Jack? I mean, you want to figure out like how this all, these tremendous paradigm shifts culturally result in expressions politically. Judd Gregg this morning on the Hill writes, is there a post-Trump GOP? So these voters, these people that express themselves this way, Donald Trump received around 74 million votes in this year's election. I'm reading Joe Biden got more than 80 million votes. Even if you take out California, which would be a uniquely healthy development for the rest of the nation, Biden attracted a distinct majority of the electorate. This is an unacceptable conclusion for Trump, but it should lead to an inaccessible conclusion for those of us who want to rebuild a conservative majority in our country. So this guy is a conservative, and he's writing about what the F is going to happen with the Republican Party. Many argue, many argue that these numbers just reflect that the country is deeply divided. Actually, they reflect a great deal more than that. If you consider who voted for Trump and who did not, it becomes immediately apparent that there is a definite workable coalition that is center-right. If activated, it would provide an effective alternative to the Democratic progressive movement.
I agree.
Okay.
It's all a balance, Seth. Okay, let me just say one thing. First of all, I want you to comment on the recounts, the $3 million recounts.
Well, there's the the fallacy. There's the fallacy of the recount, and then there's the reality of the recount. Now, the Trump administration spent $3 million because if you want a recount and you ask for a recount, you've got to get a recount in the state, but you've got to pay for that. Your campaign has to pay for that recount. So,
and how many votes did it turn up more for Trump when he did the recount?
0.
Well, there was 82, but they were for Biden.
No, it netted Biden 82 more votes.
Yes, exactly. Now, Jim posted something. Can you put that up again?
Jim posted that his drill sergeant had held stock in Exxon, which he referred to as ESO because he's as ancient as we are.
Yes, I need to stop the ESO. Okay, but here's the thing.
And the reason it wasn't called ESO is because ESO was a curse in Japanese.
But the guy that pays his salary had stock in Exxon. Okay. So I just, it's obviously, I hope it's tongue in cheek, but in fact, that is the case. I mean, really, why do you go into Iraq? This is not new news, But anyway, talking about what you were is more important, really, to the discussion, Seth.
So I mean, but the question that we all want to ask is how is it possible for people to believe just overt lies? How is it possible? How do we hear the following and believe that it's true? How do you listen to not the following, what we listened to earlier, where Maria Bartiromo asked Trump what happened? Where's the FBI? Where's your evidence? And Trump goes on to say, the FBI is missing in action.
Yeah, okay. So, years ago, before Trumpism, Bobby Jindal, Republican, Louisiana, right?
Yep.
Put out a warning. This is years ago. He said, the Republican Party is quickly becoming the party of stupid. He was a Republican. What did he see? Well, he saw what liberals saw, and it was reinforced by Trumpism. And it's, you can't say stupid. Stupid is such a generalized word, but you and I spend half our time analyzing the Trump brain, and it's psychology. It's not politics. It's human psychology, anthropology, and sociology. Those are the subjects that these folks should have studied because it helps explain their own actions much better than politics does.
Yeah, it does, but we still haven't, Jim provided us with David Brooks' article the other day on the rotting of the Republican mind. And there's that, which illustrates what the emotional disconnect is, what the cultural and emotional disconnect is. But it also, it doesn't really illustrate this. Mediaite is reporting that there's a possibility that Donald Trump, the headline is, Trump still won't concede. This is from yesterday morning or yesterday evening. Trump still won't concede, but reportedly plotting to steal spotlight from Biden presidency, including announcing 2024 run during inauguration.
Unbelievable.
So there is a there's an FUism that goes along with losing and having your worldview undone. That is, I mean, how do you?
Here's the deal, Seth.
It's so myopic.
You're living in Sioux City, Iowa. You have your life. You have your car. You have your family. You have your birthdays. You have Thanksgiving. You have your job. You have your cookouts. You've got everything there. The only pipeline to other reality is media. Let's say TV, although we know it's the internet. And that is the only pipeline. So you're looking through this, peeping through this little hole, which has become a big hole, and you're seeing something that's very, very different with what you are experiencing, which is your silo and your narrative. What is the first thing you're going to say to yourself? It's fake news.
Well, okay, but there is the psychocultural effect of that. And then there is the genuine real-time political effect of that. And those are two entirely different things. Headline, Daily Beast, Trump's tantrum over loss could smash Georgia GOP. And the guy who is the governor of Georgia couldn't possibly be more ruby red Trump authoritarian.
Corrupt.
Guy's name is Governor Brian Kemp. He's been in the news.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Brian Kemp. Mm-hmm. And he's been in the news. And because he's been following the law, and it's been impossible for him not to follow the law, this guy is as Trump loves him when he's doing what Trump wants and when he's kissing Trump's ass. And here's what Trump had to say about Brian Kemp on Sunday. The governor's done nothing. He's done absolutely nothing. I'm ashamed that I endorsed him.
I'm sorry, I was thinking of Purdue before. Absolutely right. And you know what's even more frightening, Seth, is these yo-yos are, most of them, these Republican yo-yos are so fucking scared of being in Kemp's position to have Trump publicly come down on them that they are frozen in cowardice.
Well, because they're afraid that this is going to happen. You get in front of the electorate, a big cheering crowd of the electorate, that this guy lathers up into a frenzy. And then from the podium, Trump says, quote, how am I doing, by the way, Brian? Are we going to win it? Because if we're not, I tell you what, I'm going to take my endorsement away from him if I don't. It's as transactional.
You know what's pathetic, Seth, of more than any other factor in the last 4 years, is that Americans can be so easily bullied.
How?
Think about it.
How? Not some Americans, Jack.
I know, but I'm talking about
can't be
74 million Americans are like Sally girls. They're pussies because they're being bullied by one overweight, stupid IQ 72.
I disagree. There are many women who have much more balls than these douchebags do.
Oh, I agree.
And half of them are being named to the fucking Biden administration, by the way.
That's exactly right, which is a whole other topic.
I can't fucking wait for this.
But Seth, think of the number of people in the Republican Party who have allowed themselves to be bullied by this troglodyte. Is that the word?
Troglodyte.
Cave
dweller.
I mean, sir, isn't that depressing?
And if you think about it, Jack, what kind of person lacks that level of personal integrity? Someone who has bad boundaries, someone who has no sense of self-esteem, someone who's never had somebody say to them that, what they're doing is right and encourage them and mentored them. The failure of the educational system, the cultural impact of what Ken Robinson was talking about on our show half an hour ago, the results of which can go in a bunch of different directions. And one of the different directions that it can go, if you have institutional processes which are inconsistent with the reality of your environment, something's got to give. And we act surprised. Oh, these people believe that? How did that happen?
Yeah.
It fucking happened because the structure of our society not only let it happen, but encouraged it to happen. And you add to that mix global climate change, food scarcity, water scarcity, political unrest.
Pandemic.
It's a formula. I mean, if you think that just because Biden was elected, that we're now, literally going to be dancing in the streets like we were when he was elected, when it was called for him, you got another thing coming. So what are you? And this is the action item that you and I have dedicated ourselves to with this show. That the action item that people can take is in your own community where your politics is local, starting there and expanding your area of purview, attacking the Bolsheviks, attacking those who would want fascist one-party rule. It just so happens that would be Republicans now, but it's not really Republicans, it's Trumpists.
Yeah. So my feeling is if you want to sell socialism to the right, all you have to do is not include African Americans and little brown people. And they would buy it in a heartbeat.
What do you mean they would buy it? They already buy it.
Yeah, that's true.
People running around with Trump flags, flying from the back of their pickup truck, are in the same economic boat as the rest of us.
Yeah.
That their level of aspirationalism is different than mine. The frustration that they see. Now they're going to have a Biden administration, and who's going to be front and center? Women of color, people who are articulate. That's aspirational.
Yep.
Who is the future of our country? South Asian women, young Black and Latino men and women. That's who is this country.
That's who we are.
That's who we are.
And they are in denial. They are so scared of the demographic changing. They will do anything at this point to try to truncate it.
Yeah,
absolutely anything. Anything that's immoral, unconstitutional. They're fighting a losing battle, and they know it, Seth.
Fuck them.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm done empowering these people by validating what they say. Now it's time to attack the methods by which they say it. And to be honest with you, if you're not furious with Obama for installing Merrick Garland in a recess session, you're out of your mind. That's why liberal Democrats are as to blame for our situation as the people we're talking about right now. People who don't want to play by the rules of reality, people who want to be genteel and be nice and not crack heads.
Or the AOC, or the AOCs of the world.
The AOCs of the world, who don't understand that the very nature of politics is you got to move the ball a bit at a time.
Right.
It's more important for those people to be right than to affect change.
I think that should be the tagline end of our show, Seth.
I agree. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
Oh, there are a million things, but let's wait until Wednesday.
Fair enough. All right, so we cut it down to 90 minutes today, kids.
That's good. It should never run longer than that. Thank you to everybody who timed in. And Pete, I don't know who the Bears are, but I imagine it's a football team.
Yeah, you don't know who the Bears are.
No.
You went to Princeton where they used to play football, and have you ever heard of anybody named George Papa Bear Hallis?
No.
This is why you're a communist. We're going to go into this next time. This is why the socialist. I mean, you went to Sweden and you probably learned orienteering.
I didn't, but I always admired those who do it.
I bet you didn't know that I knew what orienteering was, did you?
I think it's wonderful. I'll teach you how to pronounce it one day.
Oh, sure. Well, how would you pronounce it?
No, I'm going to save this, Seth.
In Swedish?
Your education is a very important part of my agenda.
All right. That's fabulous. And vice versa, by the way, and vice versa. And on that note, we will leave it, and we'll have more material and observations and humor for you guys on Wednesday at noon. For Seth and Jack, signing off. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.